Happy, thank you. You're gonna make me cry. All right.
Mr. Pop.
Let's hear
Mr.
it.
Pop.
Hitchhiker across USA, walked around Ross on the way, shaved her legs and then he was the shoes. She said, hey babe, take a walk on the wild side. Hey honey, take a walk on the wild side. He came from out on the island. In the bathroom she was everybody's darling, but she never lost her head, even when she was given head. She said, hey babe, take a walk on the wild side. Hey honey, take a walk on the wild side. And the colored girl say, diddy, 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 diddy. Little Joe never once gave it away. Everybody had to pay. A hustle here and a hustle there. New York City was the place where they said, hey babe, take a walk on the wild side. Hey Joe, take a walk on the wild side. Sugar Bone Fairy came and hit the streets, looking for soul food and a place to eat. Went to the Apollo, you should have seen him go, go, go. He said, hey sugar, take a walk on the wild side. Hey babe, take a walk on the wild side. All right. Hey. Jackie is just speeding away. She thought she was James Dean for a day. Then I guess she had to crash. Valium would help that fast. Said, hey baby, take a walk on the wild side. Hey baby, take a walk on the wild side. And the colored girls say, do, 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 do.
Say what?
Once you have forever. A friend of mine who don't belong here, and you continue to be reincarnated in a world of pain and suffering and evil because you don't realize how the heck you got here and why you're a stranger in a strange land. It's like the red pill. And he says, you see, you don't belong here because your origins are up in the pleroma, among the ions. But as long as you don't accept that, you're just going to be on the treadmill of reincarnation forever. A friend of mine once, who was a very devout fundamentalist and very intelligent guy, one night he told me, Bob, I've finally given up. You're right. This stuff is not true. And my reaction was, Chris, let's not be too hasty here.
Welcome to Gnostic Informant, and today I am joined by, for the second time, Dr. Robert M. Price, and author of like 10 million books and a million blogs. And he is basically to H.P. Lovecraft what J.J. Abrams is to George Lucas.
Huh.
So how you doing, Dr. Price?
Oh, great. I'm tickled that another book of mine has just come out. I got a bunch of copies of Judaizing Jesus, and I'm still an expectant father because I got Merely Christianity and When Gospels Collide coming out pretty quick.
Nice. Yeah, you were just always writing books over there.
Yeah.
And they're good books too. So everyone go check that out right now, Amazon, and just type in Robert Price and Amazon, and you'll have a whole library in front of you. So,
And by the way, the ones on South Africa and guns are by two other Robert M. Prices.
okay. Oh, that's good to know. Wow, there's two of them out there, huh?
Yeah, please.
So let's get into some Gnosticism. Let's start in let's go back a little bit. Let's start to where that word actually comes from and how it became sort of a religious movement.
Well, it's from the Greek word gnosis, knowledge, which obviously is almost just the same thing in a different alphabet. With knowledge, the G becomes a K and all that. It's also in Sanskrit as jnana, in English letters Jnana, where it means the same thing, and all of them mean a kind of privileged revelational knowledge that it's elite knowledge. It's not. It's like flesh and blood has not revealed it to you, as in Matthew, and that once you have this and understand it, knowledge of what, and that usually is a matter of the whole doctrine of non-dualist Hinduism and Sufism, because they refer to themselves as Gnostic also, and the various varieties of Gnosticism. It has to do with the origin of the world, and therefore the origin of you as an individual soul. And as long as you, in all of these systems, with a possible exception of Sufism, I'm not sure, the gnosis, the knowledge, has to do with the fact that you don't belong here, and you continue to be reincarnated in a world of pain and suffering and evil because you don't realize how the heck you got here and why you're a stranger in a strange land. And that implies, like when the disciples asked Jesus, tell us what our end will be. I assume their destiny. And he says, have you gone back to the beginning that you ask about the end? Because if you stand at the beginning, you'll know your end. And there's a bunch of stuff like that. And the idea is that this complicated uh, sort of a textbook oversimplification of Gnosticism is, which is not to condescend to viewers, it's condescending to me to try to make it understandable to myself, since there's so many variants of it. The idea, and again, it's almost the same in Samkhya Hinduism, in yoga, and in Jainism, as well as in non-dualist Vedanta and Gnosticism. The idea is that originally there was just a kind of a lake of matter. Now, where did that come from? Well, according to one branch of Gnosticism, it was created by the demiurge, which is taken from Plato, meaning a craftsman, sub deity, not one of the. Plato said there are the Olympian gods, but they're too exalted to dirty their hands with creating a world. So it was the demiurge, the craftsman, who did it, and that sort of explains why it's not such a great product. Like I think Hume said once that, yeah, there is surprising design in the world, but not enough to say that a perfect God was its creator. And Gnosticism thought, well, yeah, how are you going to explain that? So they either the demiurge created the matter or just found it. It had been there from all eternity, kind of, and so he created a material world, but it was uh, it was just inert. And as in these other systems, it was like you might think of it as a placid lake. Though in Gnosticism, he's created the various life forms, but they're not really alive. Now, who was this guy? Well, they believed that the world of light, the pleroma, the fullness of light, was the spiritual realm, and at the peak of it was the unknown Father, and that he emanated from himself. It's kind of like Neoplatonism. He emanated pairs of what they called ions, from which we get our word eon, meaning a long time.
Right.
And so each pair produced or begat and birthed another pair of ions, and each pair was called a syzygy or a yoke fellow. And there, according to Valentinus, the greatest of the Gnostic teachers, there were 365 ions altogether. And Gnosticism and so forth had to do with astrology, as I guess everything did back then. Well, at the very, now, why an odd number? Well, the very last one was Sophia, wisdom. And she wanted a partner and wanted to continue the chain of emanations, but there wasn't one for who knows what reason. So she somehow contrived to have a virginal conception, and this was sort of an allegory for saying, since she was the furthest removed from the father, she didn't really know what was going on back at the home office and wanted to know. But again, too far away. So she wants to conceive in a couple of different ways. And so she comes up with a bad idea as her offspring, the demiurge, who thinks he is the ultimate God. He is Jehovah or Yahweh Sabaoth, the God of Israel. And and they quote him from Isaiah, "There, I am God. There is none beside me." Well, he announces this to nobody in particular, but his mom, Sophia, laughs him to scorn and calls him Saklas, the blind one, and rebukes him. But he's there, and he wants to be like the Father. And instead of the emanations, he creates all these life forms. But first, the archons, which I assume to be the same as archangels, the ruling angels. They're his flunkies, and together they create this world. And just like in the Carpenter song, in fact, the demiurge is translatable as the Carpenter, where it says, "The angels got together and decided to create a dream come true," in one of their old 60s songs. Well, that's Gnosticism. That's just what they did, but the dream was defective because there was no life in it. How are we going to get these things up and running? And so what they did was the archons. Now, and there are two different Gnostic accounts of this.
Right, right, right.
In one of them, they found one. They mugged one of the ions, the man of light, also called the primal man. This probably goes back to Zoroastrianism and so on. And
Yeah.
they ripped him apart and used the, I like to say, the divine photons, the sparks of the divine light.
Wow.
Uh, and they use this as what we might call self-replicating DNA
Yeah.
for all the mud pie creations of the demiurge. And so they, like Frankenstein's monster, they woke up, such as they were, uh, and there's it gets even more complicated than that. According to another one, um, they they somehow got Sophia curious about what was going on here, what had her son done, and so she looks into the great lake of matter and sees her own reflection, which is glowing as she is with a divine light, and so they steal the light of the reflection and put it into the creations of the demiurge. But one way or another, there is stolen divine light from the pleroma, which is the only way the world of matter can be vivified and come alive. Again, this is very much like some Kaya Jainism and so forth, where they said that there was a lake of inert matter, and
Yeah.
somehow these various Purushas, as they called them, these divine sparks, the same thing pretty much,
Right.
uh, fell into the world of prakriti or matter, which had latent within it various elements. This is very much like Empedocles and some of the pre-Socratic philosophers.
Yeah.
And that got everything charged up, and different combinations of the elements yielded different life forms. So, very much the same. They may have gotten it one from the other. Who knows? Maybe great minds thought alike. But the important thing, especially about the primal man version, is that it enabled a redeemer myth. That it wasn't, they didn't exhaust all of the light in the man of light to give life to the humans and so forth. But some of it, and the rest of the man of light managed to escape and get back to the pleroma. Now, he wants to come back into the world to redeem all the sparks that were lost. Boy, is this like Isaac Luria's Kabbalah also. I mean, there's lots of versions of this.
Yeah.
And so how's he going to do that? Well, either he appears as a revealer, like Morpheus in the Matrix, which of course is almost overtly based on Gnosticism.
Yes.
Either he reappears as a teacher to, or sends people that have more than their share of the divine light in them, a Gnostic elite, to seek out the other poor mortals who are strangers in a strange land. Well, what am I doing here? Why do I not fit? Well, there it's again, it's like Morpheus. They locate these individuals, kind of like Diogenes, the cynic philosopher who went
Yes.
around with the light
The
in the
light.
middle
Yeah.
of the day and looking for an honest man. They're hard to come by. Same
Alexander the
sort of
Great.
thing.
Alexander the Great came up to him and he said, "Get out of my sunlight."
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
I love that story. Go ahead, though.
I did a story, by the way, a sword and sorcery type story called The Gordian Knot, which was about Alexander the Great.
Now, I've never heard this before. Excuse me, I should have coughed before I turned the unmute before I hit unmute. Look, I've never heard this before. This, in fact, this Gnostic informant, I just came across him, them. It has to be multiple people, right? I don't know. I don't know how anything works with worldly affairs, but I'm trying to figure it out. It doesn't sound like they understand how things work in a metaphysical or otherworldly sense. So we share our knowledge, right? And what do we produce? We produce a greater and more holistic, comprehensive understanding, and we justify that by finding utility, right? Utility, apt points of comparison. Like if you if you expect that, anyways, wisdom, knowledge, understanding, utility in the aforementioned concept, it's both simple and complex at the same time. So if it were that simple, I could say, hey, here's the deal. Or I could even better just write it out and be like, boom. But we as humans don't work that way. We're not that cool. We're not that good. We're not that smart. We're definitely not that honorable. As far as my interest in, excuse me, my interest in, I don't say Gnosticism, okay? Because that's just a word. Even using the word Gnosticism, or referring to them, if there were such a thing, there were, as Gnostics, using that language to encompass everyone under the same, umbrella or whatever. I'm using somebody else's metaphor there. That religion for breakfast guy is pretty good. Anyways, number one, I'm a high school dropout, all right? I've gone back to college a little teeny bit, but I have no degrees in anything, all right? I'm only bringing that up because if you bring some rigid, I'm thinking of certain pundits, okay? Certain pundits that attack other pundits because their credentials aren't as, and I'm trying to steer away from words like autistic and President Sunday and things. I'm trying not to incorporate the worldly taint that we're so used to being submerged in. I don't want to bring that into tonight, because ultimately, let's say someone was here, right? I don't know, probably not. But if anyone's here, thank you for being here. I appreciate that. We're not quite ready to get fully started yet. I just wanted to weigh in. I'm going to put that podcast back on so you can get, if anyone is interested, a better understanding of what Gnosticism is. It's important. Like, I don't know. Let me check his name here. Robert M. Price. Okay. It seems like a totally, in the parlance of the times, totally based dude, yo. I mean, like he's got his four reincarnated Supermen back there on one side. Looks like I'm not real sure. What is clip art flashing at me for? I don't know why it's flashing orange at me. But listen, Price knows what he's talking about. The Gnostic informant, I don't know him too well. He certainly has good interests. I appreciate what he's doing. They, them, it, the entity called Gnostic informant does. I was super pumped to come across something called late night Gnosticism. And as I look, because they implement some pretty bitchin' graphics on their thumbnails and whatnot. As I look, I'm like, all of this is, I think 10 days was the oldest upload on late night Gnosticism. I'm like, it's such a small world. I'm always tempted to try to draw things into the whole, right? Now, I'm willing to be wrong. And if I'm wrong, I say, okay, well, I was wrong about that. A lot of people, I think, will interpret it as crazy, which is a damn shame because they're missing out. And people like the pundit battle contest that I started to bring up, they will obsess over details that do not matter. They don't matter. What matters is our choice and agency. And some people are somewhat limited on how much agency they have. That's more like Kantian ethics. How much do you understand? And even if you don't have, as was introduced by other pundits recently, the idea of moral luck. If you're not blessed or fortunate enough to have been brought into a family, society, a realm of influence that helped elevate you to a different platform of morality just based off a routine? Because this is what we do as family. As family, our responsibility, to think of ourselves like a chain going through time and just pretend, just for fun, that we come from a pre-existence, right? That we were all unique and somewhat separate intellects. Okay, now presumably we would be in a different plane or sphere. So thinking in terms of seeing and hearing and our sensory faculties now is not the appropriate one-for-one point of comparison, but it's the only way we can get there. So bear with me. Pretend that we come from a pre-existence and we all have some form of autonomous intelligence in regard to how we think now. I think, therefore I am. There's an I, right? As we I don't know how far I want to get into this. When we compare details and we start to have a contest over this, that, and the other, without considering our agency, our capacity for choice, then we're already off to a bad start. But there is also this idea of moral luck. All right, we'll use that word just so we have a point of reference we can share. If we're all linked, right? If we pretend that we're all linked through history, that in the pre-existence, we all sat around and we're like, look, there are certain things that we're going to forget when we're down on Earth. There's certain things that just won't make sense, ever. In fact, if we do come across things that make sense in that mortal realm, it will seem illogical. It'll seem to run against the grain of what otherwise, the points of comparison that we would otherwise make, like you touch a hot stove, your hand gets burned, right? Like, so fire, hot, heat, bad for naked skin anyways. We make observations and comparisons, and we contrast and categorize, and we do the things that we do presumably to survive, right? Now, there are other higher functions on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We get to more intellectual or possibly spiritual pursuits to really feel complete. But this idea of complete, feeling complete, being part of the whole, having all of the right perspective, all of the right information. If you're a collector of, say, anything, you're going to understand what the compulsion for complete comprehension is. You want to have, if you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, not having 5 is going to bug you to no end. You have to get that 5, right? Collectors really understand that compulsion. I think we all understand how, and this could just be emotionally, but we understand how trying to represent ourselves within the whole is a much more fulfilling thing than breaking things off and harping about the details. I mean, that's a terrible waste of time. It's a terrible waste of time. And, like Socrates and the slave boy, the story of Socrates, of course, there's some fancy Greek name for that episode. But the story goes that there's this argument that you're born with intellect or it's something else, right? So that's the argument. And Socrates says, no. This is uniform. There's no, like, you're born intelligent and that person. Intelligence is just a standard of comparison, right? Now, I say standard of comparison or point of comparison a lot here because that comes into the Gnostic idea of essentialism, that things are true already. And as we come into this world, or as we experience what we experience, we're making comparisons to something that we can, it's not a feeling, although some people try to reduce it to that. They're like, you feel that confirmation of the Spirit, testify, that type of thing. And although that's a testimony of something, it's not a comprehensive understanding. Comprehensive understanding in some way, when we can achieve that, feels like it makes sense, right? It's like, oh, and you can feel subconsciously your brain, in our dreams, we do this to some extent. We organize the information so that it's structured properly. And it's not an endless list of details. It's a comprehensive, holistic understanding of something that if it's not a complete contrivance, right? If it's something real, then and that can survive or sustain itself in this mortal sphere, it will have a homeostatic makeup about it. You know, it's not just one static thing, right? There's going to be mechanics, like we have a heart and lungs and all these things. Homeostasis is how our bodies work, our kidneys and liver and brain and blood vessels and nerve endings, and all of these different things work in simultaneity all at the same time. It's homeostasis. Things on Earth follow similar patterns. If we look at ecosystems or, just look around. That's the deal. We look at even a tree. A tree has rings on the inside. Each year it grows, and it might drop pine cones or seeds or any number of things to ensure its species continued existence. It's not just one thing. It's not just one substance that does one thing. There are many things that fit into the whole. And we as humans, which are more than just material, this is a fact, right? We aim to prove it. We as humans are not just about survival of a physical type. We need to survive in other ways also. Now, there are cultural differences, cultural relativism, and different ways to try to understand, but we go terribly wrong as humans when we try to separate things terminally. Like Muslims and Jews are incompatible. We're going to watch a Sam Harris thing later where he makes that case. And that's my man. He's a champion. He's a champion of gnosis. But the thing we're going to watch is from 2005. So I would suspect Dr. Harris would have an update to that, But I just want to use it as a point of comparison because it shows us that secularism and rationality are the saving grace that we as humans get to use, to implement, to understand the whole, right? And that runs contrary to this idea of making separations out of things, like this ethno-nationalism talk that is nothing new, but it's starting to become mainstream in really weird and troubling ways again. In many different areas, Europe, America, and third world countries have always wanted autonomy, but to achieve that, it's a mess. And so what I'm here to say, all right, now that's me talking, but slipping into preacher mode here. We all have a common human heart. We all have something inside of us that helps us confirm what truth is. We all have the capacity for love and understanding. Those things might feel different person to person, but collectively we can appreciate what that thing means, love in this case, or the common human heart, when we reference the human condition. And as humans within said condition, how we're subject to a de-evolution of sorts based off emotional and internal and external problems that take us away from the whole, from feeling complete and functional. This is people like Freud and Carl Jung and Lacan. They're so important in history because the psychoanalysis, which branches off into neurology, and you have all these disciplines to try to understand these pieces. We are now in the age of hyper specialization. Really need to start coming back into the whole. But I think they're worried that will become cults of personality, religions in general, which have not done well for humans entirely. Right? We want to get into that. Why? Why are these things falling apart? Why, in spite of our capacity to love and understand and be curious and compelled and drawn to the whole, the more you learn, the more you're exposed to, the more you travel, the more perspectives you're not just privy to, but that you like really fully grok, the easier it is to learn more, right? It's because you've seen larger swaths of the whole. And there are different analogies and metaphors we can use to help us along the way. Religion, I think, has attempted to serve that purpose, like don't eat pork, like kosher laws, which are total horseshit now, right? That's another thing that's just a fact. But these ideas survive through the filter of something called faith, right? What's the value of faith? Well, the way people talk about it and teach it in religions is It's not just nothing. The value of faith is not just there is no value. It's negative value. It takes from the whole. It takes from the whole and it keeps things like a stingy little shithead over here. Like, President Sunday did with Not So Erudite. I don't have to like Not So Erudite or know President Sunday or anything about these people other than the examples that they leave to be examples. He's a fractured and disturbed individual. The gal, Not So Erudite, I mean, and I really hate getting into this, but it's a good way to understand how when we don't mind the whole, when we don't look for the whole, when we give up on that in favor of this clique, club, sect, etc., how we're not only wrong, we're actively hurting what could otherwise be, the entirety, the goodness, the light, the divine spark, absolute wisdom. None of us will be able to achieve it individually, especially in the age of hyper-specialization. But we need to start thinking about coming back together. And a disagreement like the difference between psychometry and psycho, whatever, I'm not sure. Again, Canadian YouTubers, you really need to stop. You really, really, really need to stop. It's a fucking mess. You don't understand American politics. You're not intellectuals. I don't know what affords Canadians the opportunity to be so terminally online, but it's crazy how many of you are out here doing this. It's insane. With Canada, come on, give these people something to do, please. Like, you're not journalists. You're just making it more complicated because you're so privileged. You're so privileged and so white, so very white. What's coming for me? Come on. That should tell you something. But they're so white and they're so privileged that they just make the antagonisms worse. They make the fault lines, the vulnerabilities, the liabilities that we have socially. They make them worse. They get in there and they antagonize those fault lines because really, let's face it, it's viable. That they receive a reward. They look at how their videos are doing. They say, oh, my engagement's down or this or that or the other. We're going to start getting to a point like I'm going to call him my friend from the channel Step Back. He's Canadian, right? And he's like, got that privilege thing going on where he's like, oh, I did a video about China and it's really, really good. But he's afraid. Like I said about how Emma Vigeland's issue, the problem from her going from here where she is, which is great, to really amazing, is not looking for the middle between the crimes of the Western past, particularly like when you look through like CIA and coups that America has been responsible for, no less assassinations and extra legal affairs. When you look at that, and then you look at, say, the Great Leap Forward in China, which really just produced a lot of dead people, birds, and failed agriculture projects. When you look at that and you try to take the middle to be fair, then you get essentially a watered down version of the anti-West propaganda. So Emma, Step Back, all the Canadians, if they're good, they're still attached to that. But most of them, they're like, oh, America's so evil and blah, 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 blah. And they're using, that's a different psychoanalytical mess that we're not going to get into today. But as we are here today to try to learn things about the nature of eternity, the true nature of ourselves, what religion gets wrong, why they get it wrong, and what are some of the affects of getting it wrong. Is it better to just be neutral and disengaged than it is to get it wrong but just not be too active? See, this is the difference between belief and process, and secularism and rationality have offered us the opportunity to discard the bathwater and keep the baby. But then there are really good arguments when you look at Aquinas, Thomas Aquinas, and St. Augustine. They literally killed people for being heretical when the heretics were most likely, not just like a loose opinion, there's a lot of consensus around this. The churches and sects that were labeled heretical by mostly Irenaeus, on heretics is his writing, prescribed burning them at the stake. So, it was death to the heretics. And we took that as a Western world and ran with it. We're going to get into Patrice Lumumba and look at how he, being outside of the society that he was in, damned him to the death that he suffered. Wanting to make things better and playing off of both sides equals shot from both sides. People want to make it sound like Patrice Lumumba was killed by the CIA. Or there's a very popular effort right now to really take Henry Kissinger and make sure people really remember him as a monster in history. Henry Kissinger is no good guy, right? I'm not saying, oh, he's a good guy. But this inclination to place blame squarely on people that were actually a mitigation of what other people wanted to be worse in, you know? Kissinger was not the most... he was not the stupidest, number one. He was not the most uncaring. He came from, you know, Holocaust, right? Like that's a direct understanding of what we were up against. Things are so much more complicated, but Patrice Lumumba is a very particular character. You had the Ghanese coup preceding that, and you had Pan-African or Pan-Arab North African Nasserite ideology. There's so many things going on. It's not fair, and it's just not right either. And I don't mean morally. I mean, it's technically not right to assert that the United States, particularly the CIA, or the CIA particularly as an extension of the United States, are responsible for these things because their interests are oil, money, profit, blah, 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 blah. These narratives are what you look at, Emma Vigeland, Step Back, all the Canadian YouTubers. Sunday doesn't even fit into this because President Sunday is just, he's got issues. He's got mental, psychological, spiritual issues. All right. These other people are more advanced in bringing good info. They're more advanced in the practices and procedures, observations, comparisons, categorizations, and all of the things that are going to, what's a good word here? And I'm not coming up with one. That are going to take the material or take the cause and help us as their audience or viewer understand the effect. You know, I don't know what journalists and pundits do, but for them to do it well, you have to be a little more fluid. This whole like moral policing is more immoral than the problem perceived when it comes to Sunday. And breaking things down and be like, you're not blah, 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 you're not qualified to do this or that is really just an insecurity. This feeling like he's not qualified or he's an imposter if he wants to step outside of the disciplines that he thinks that the intellectuals are supposed to follow. So I say it's a psychoanalytical mess. Spirituality, when it is done right, making the right points of comparison, might not make you a nice, calm, even vegan that the Canadians want the whole world to be like. But it is going to give you the confidence to say, you know what, I'm not wrong about that. And if I am, you need to do a little bit of a better job in helping me understand why and how I am. Look, there's a lot to get into. Gnosticism and the misperception about duality, good, evil. Okay, Gnosticism's one thing. We're gonna keep dwelling on that, and we'll listen to the podcast from Gnostic Informant. It's good, but it's not there. Okay, I think a lot of people who identified as atheists, new atheists, secularists, humanists, a lot of the things that most younger people consider themselves now are still lost. They're missing something from the whole. We recognize that morality, ethics, creativity, love, a lot of these things that we just life wouldn't be worth living without without that more. Why do we make music? You know, stuff like that. These things that make humans creative and function, the contrast between pleasure and pain, light and darkness. Duality is part of our experience, but it's more just like a means to understand the whole. When people start to get it, they're like, oh, there is such a thing as evil, right? There's no such thing as evil, but it's easier for them to say, oh, it's a battle against this, that, and the other, right? And all of our stories, Star Wars and all this stuff, they tell the story of a battle against opposing sides. And life is just not like that. Reality is a whole. It's one whole. And if we cannot bring it together, if we can't make it comprehensive and complete, then it will bring these unintended consequences that are so much more brutal and weird than one might think otherwise. It's not just a mistake. It's a belief-based mistake. And beliefs that are in error and shut off from more reasoning, no less, other people and their perspectives, will produce death, killing, ethnic cleansing, all these really terrible, horrendous things. That's kind of how President Sunday's mind frame is. People that think that morality is like this, and what's proper is like this, and what's bad is like this, and they're in these categories. Yet they will look at religion because, my opinion is because they think that to play the part of the intellectual, others have just said religion is just a stupid man's game. Right? They're not there yet. They haven't traveled on the path long enough to understand that you don't have to be religious. You don't have to believe in anything. In fact, you probably shouldn't believe in anything you can't subject to a process. In fact, that's good advice. I hate dogmas because that's when we start getting into these unintended consequences that are invariably lethal. But we should not be dogmatic. However, we should learn why confidence is an asset. There's just so much to go over. The more people that come in, the more people talk, the more people engage, the more conversations we have, the more refined and elegant we're able to deliver this information. Shit, that's probably been really quiet. The better we get, the more value we'll have. And that value is not viability. Equity and equality are the same thing that require all of us to make a choice to participate. And as we do that, then good things happen. But when we start to break it down and apart and say these things are irreconcilable, like China is saying about their business, as we are brutal assholes to all these islands in Tibet and Xinjiang and Hong Kong and Taiwan and America now, and as China's fucking terrible. They're terrible liars, terrible liars. You cannot trust the Chinese government. This is not Chinese people. I love Chinese people, which is not one type of person. By the way, there's a lot of, you say, oh, we speak Mandarin. That's it. Cantonese is dirty, Southern, that's like shore people talk and stuff. And Japan is even more racist and terrible. You cannot give people the opportunity to say, oh, you just can't understand. This is our business. The West needs to understand that China handles China's business. No, motherfucker. We are all sharing the same planet. China will wrap their narrative in a half-truth and say that the world is big enough for the United States and China to both develop. What about other people too? They're in there also. And as individual small countries say, we have a right to autonomy, we have a right to develop and grow, that's fine. But when you take a country with essentially the largest population and viable land mass and you start making claims like that, it's not so good. What is good is coming back into the whole and saying, you know what, we're not going to lie and blur and blend truth to make our version of the story come out as the right one. No, the right one is beyond our control, but it is not away from we have an opportunity to participate in it, and choice, agency, going against the grain of what maybe our flesh or our getting back to the link all through time from the pre-existence to now, let's say my dad and my dad's dad, or my mom and my mom's mom, in any which way going back through time, said, look, I'm going to set you up so that when you're there, you'll be able to start from this platform, right? The where your family starts you from is so much more important than we really talk about. We in general kind of believe families are important because it's just true. Communities are important because that's just true. But where government versus agency determines the nature of those things is what we need to talk about on non-Sunday days. But today, we're going to talk about, as individuals, why that choice to participate is more important than the system that we're looking to participate in at first, okay? Because all roads lead to Rome. That's how that works. The holism that saves us, from which we come, that we are aching and eager to get back into, to have real understanding, to say like, you know, one of my friends out here, he's really troubled over some, he's really troubled. I hope he doesn't mind, but I'm going to play one of his videos where he expresses some doubt and concern over, he's a Calvinist, right? He's a recovering Calvinist from what I understand. And Calvinists have this just one of many other ways that they make this separation, point of comparison based off of bad reasoning, where they say there are the saved and there are the damned. And those names and those numbers were written before we were born. They're written in the book of life, and if you're in the book of life, you're there. Otherwise, you're going to lake of fire. And it's just not, there's no function, utility, point of comparison. And most importantly, this is what we're really going to get into. Where does the authority in your idea of a church come from? Or where does the authority in your idea of a secular reality come from? Where authority comes from, authorship, right? Authorship and explanation of what's real. Are we just being obedient? Or is it because we understand? Our belief is based off a process that is not only able to be backed up, but the more we engage in the process, the more of the whole that we understand. You see, there's more than two paths, but one is to break things up into two paths. The other one follows no line. The other one can walk on that one, this one, that one, but you're still moving forward. It's going to work for you, and you'll be able to make your own analogy and metaphor. But when you follow this line of obedience based on things like faith and order and law and all this terrible, terrible stuff that humans do to each other, it creates unintended consequences that inevitably lead to lethality. It's a bad, bad, bad deal. So let's get a little more learning on Gnosticism, or at least a Valentinian comic book lovers' take on it. Again, I'm a high school dropout, and this isn't like a brag. I'm saying this because I've not read anything, really. I mean, I've read a bunch of books, but like, you know, I read like the Nietzsche portable reader, and I mean, like, I've read stuff, but I've never, like, I try to look for the distillation of people's ideas. Like, what's the point? If someone says, okay, well, strength is a good virtue, and I say, like, why? And they say, because if you're not strong, then other strong people will try to take from you. And I say, why? And they say, well, because, you know, this, that, or the other. I say, why? And you keep going until you're done. Another way is to say, and, you know, they'll say, well, we're going to have 22 people, you're working in a restaurant, 22 people come in tonight for dinner. And I don't know if we have the table set up. And so there's people eating, and I need more tables if I'm to be ready. And, you know, like, you go until you can't do anything more, and you have a comprehensive understanding of that thing. This is the process that I'm interested in following. But I don't have time to sit down and hyper specialize in reading every word that Kant wrote. I understand the distillation, the essence. You know, name a philosopher and test me. Name a historical idea or religion, more importantly, because that I have done quite a bit of reading. I've actually physically and literally read through the entire King James Bible twice, once with study guides throughout. And now that I've also read the Book of Mormon stuff, the Book of Mormon several times over, the Pearl of Great Price, Doctrine and Covenants. Now, the Pearl of Great Price has some things that I want to touch on tonight. The Book of Abraham and the Book of Moses. The Book of Moses is just total horseshit. The Book of Abraham has a very interesting story that debunks Joseph Smith's claim. But the Mormons, as a graduation of... See, I think it's an attempt to unify and bring the utility out of some of these spiritual teachings without having to defer to some of the dogma and authority that has been demonstrated as toxic. Already with the split between Catholic and Protestant, you see it. But prior to all that, you've got other religions of both the Judaic and Christian tradition, which it's tough to say did Gnosticism predate that stuff? These ideas were out there much more readily than we tend to understand nowadays. And books like that Irenaeus wrote on heretics sets the stage. St. Augustine, who comes from the Manichaean order, Mani, he was a type of Gnostic, but he's a little weirder. He was no Valentinus. But anyways, St. Augustine comes from this like super hippied out cult, the Manichaean cult. And he sets about writing, you know, on heretics. So until, like I've talked about before, until the findings and eventually the translations of Nag Hammadi, the Nag Hammadi library was founded in 1949, I believe, and the translation started to hit schools and such in the 60s. So think about the development of intellectuals and society in the 60s. And you could say, well, that's because of technology and media and things like that. And I say, Nag Hammadi, the Gnostic writings may have a much more direct influence on a world that wants answers, wants to get back into the hole and just can't. And when they are given good information, then we can, it's like any basic, like a Pulleyan lever system and stuff like that. Like my book here, how things work, the way things work. Like it's all about, you know, mechanical engineering principles, but these aren't super, super complicated. Once you see it in practice, you don't need to understand it. And that's my point here before I put the podcast back on. I've not read this stuff. I've not heard this stuff, but when people are right, they're right. And a lot of these ideas we're coming up with simultaneously. That is the best thing in the world. It speaks to the essential Platonic ideals that explain reality, that explain what we are, what we really truly are, how we best work, how we best share in that experience, and many, many other things that there's no one answer for, but at the same time is of oneness. All right, so I'm gonna put this back on. I've not heard this stuff. I'm a fucking high school dropout. I don't want to talk like big smart guy. I want to cut to the quick, but I can't do that without other people. Today might not be the best day because I'm not really digging on the idea of chat. I don't want to get distracted. I don't want to argue with people that don't get it. I need you to get it. And if you really are compelled to test my ideas and converse with me and not just have me like tickle your fucking taint, then DM me at Timothy Peer on Twitter. That's at capital T, Timothy, capital P, P-E-R, at Timothy Peer. DM me. If it's like you don't want to use Twitter out of principle, that's fine. I get it. I don't like it either. But I'm compelled nonetheless, over and over and over again, and I can't help myself. Maybe if I had better people to talk with, I wouldn't need to keep fishing. But you know, that lake is fucking full of nothing but tires and boots. So just go through that one little gate for me. If you leave me a DM, I'll give you all the time and energy, and you can have choice of topic. But as it stands, I've got things to say, and we've got a lot of ground to cover. And if there are people here in chat, I think it's great that you're here. I encourage you to talk with each other and try to come up with ideas. I'll scroll through it later and see, you know, what kind of good tidbits I missed. Otherwise, I'm happy to talk with you and give you all my time and attention if you do that one thing for me. That'll show me that you're not just, you know, so used to having your preferences catered to that you think it's like, this guy won't do this, then he's not getting my subscribe. You're like, good, fuck off. But if you understand that out here in this tense and weird world of political and spiritual strifes, geopolitical, all these different ways that we are positioned to destroy ourselves right now. If you are tired of not seeing a way through that, and you're frustrated with how people don't take things seriously that they should, but fucking take the wrong things seriously, like I ain't taking no Fauci ouchie, the Democratic government doing these false flag operations out here just so they can get reelected, and all that stupid, insane, privileged honky horseshit where you're like, ho, it's a joke if I do a funny voice. If I do a funny voice, it's true. Ho. 1 million subs. You'll subscribe to that. But when someone is in good faith, really trying to work through things that explain all of the all, you know, which again, I'm saying I can't do without people making the choice to want to do that, honestly. I think a big problem is people are worried of looking like they're wrong. They're worried about being seen as stupid or less than. And it's like, motherfucker, that's what I'm saying. I'm a high school dropout, okay? I have no learnings. I have none. But I have a love for truth, and I have a lust for life. So let me put this podcast back on. I'm going to get a drink, let my tyrannical, tiny-headed fat cat Eddie outside, and we'll come back after the podcast runs through a little bit, and we're going to pull up my friend Wildman Chris's video he put out, I think, today. And we're going to listen to Sam Harris and maybe Patrice Lumumba, because man, he's just like, he's on my mind. He's on my mind. He's in my heart. He's in my soul. I'm not singing Rod Stewart to you. I'm saying he is, because I'm learning a lot about CIA, and I'm brushing up so we can hit on those topics this week. We'll go back over to Twitch and stream on midnight. I don't know if I'm going to do that or not. But if we do, the CIA and Africa are...
He or his apostles do, is to go around teaching, and they're very careful. It's like when Jesus meets the rich young ruler, and he says, "Master, what do I do to inherit eternal life?" He says, "Well, it shouldn't be any secret. You know the commandments, right?" "Oh, yeah. I've kept those ever since I was a kid." He says, "Well, what do I still lack?" And Jesus says, "Well, you lack one thing. Give away your possessions and follow me." Well, that's like what these guys were on the lookout for. Somebody that has done everything and tried everything, but it doesn't make sense. There has to be more. And just like when Morpheus comes to Neo, he says, "I can tell you what it is you're after." And it's like the red pill. And he says, "You see, you don't belong here because your origins are up in the pleroma, among the ions. But as long as you don't accept that, you're just going to be on the treadmill of reincarnation forever. But you can hop off if you this again. It's like Buddhism. If you get this knowledge, it'll revolutionize you." And they may have thought it gave some sort of transcendent experience, or they may simply have thought that it gave you the password. There was, at least eventually, Gnosticism put it that way, that at death, your spark, is the divine photon, is going to have to navigate its passage up through the concentric spheres that encase the Earth. In the old Ptolemaic cosmology, the Mithraeus said the same thing, because there's an archon posted at each one of these, and you've got to know the password, their name, to get past. And they say, "Okay, go ahead." I like to think of it as guards on the Berlin Wall. They don't want the sparks to escape, because the world will come crashing down. Creation will be undone. But it's in your interest to have it collapse. You want to escape the whole mess,
Right.
whole sweatshop. And so they say, this is what you got to know. And in books like the Pistis Sophia and the books of Jehu and all that, they give lists of the names of the archons.
Yeah.
I personally think that's why the Dead Sea Scrolls includes a list of names of the angels, that they figured they would need them for the same reason.
Yeah.
And so they figured that they just had to awaken to their own origin, identity, and destiny, and no more reincarnation. But what about the people that didn't have a divine spark? Because, and I don't understand this, I'm missing some information on this. I'm not sure how they were vivified to begin with if they didn't have the divine spark, but they're not among the pneumatikoi, the spiritual ones. They fall into two other categories: the psychikoi, the soulish ones, or natural ones, you could translate, and then below them the hylix or sarkikoi. Synonyms: hylix means the wooden ones, like the wooden heads, and sarkikoi, the...
Hey friends, let me get the camera back up here. Now that I'm back, Actually, go. How you doing? How you doing tonight? Doing all right? Yeah. That kind of sucks, I guess. I'm not real sure what else we'd be missing by stopping here, but this is an hour and 20 minutes, and we could put it on faster. But I would encourage you to check out Gnosticism on your own. However, be careful, as there are, again, Irenaeus, who wrote on heretics, one or two others as well, are all of where we get our information on Gnosticism from. Essentially, traditionally, throughout the majority of Western history. Again, I keep saying Nag Hammadi, the library found at Nag Hammadi. This was a collection of writings that updated our understanding and date back to, some of the earliest, if not earlier, Christian texts. And again, Christianity is a very misunderstood religion. Christianity takes the idea of a Christ as someone who, now forget about the messianic stuff, okay? That's a fetish that people have developed in expectation of being saved from physical oppressors, right? That's like someone who's going to come with big guns. I mean, that's not literally what they think, but some may. People assume that winning in a contest of violence or force is what a messianic figure would either stop, because his power would be so, presumably its power would be so much greater than any earthly power. Really, the appeal there, though, is for the downtrodden and the oppressed to say, ha ha, you got yours. And that's not the deal, all right? Christ, in most Christian sects, people who are interested in Christ, seem to have a pretty similar understanding that this was a spiritual salvation, right? I'm not talking about Isaiah or Daniel or any of the Judaic texts that talk of a Messiah. I'm talking about once Jesus, whether real or not, I mean, apparently he lived, but there's not a ton of evidence to really outline the life. Romans keeping records and stuff is one thing, but anyways, I'm no expert in that area, although anybody could be if we wanted to put a few hours into it. Second to that, you learn it first. Objectifying the ideal presentation, that is another matter. And I think people hold me accountable for that part of the process when we're just not there yet. I could do that. Anybody could do that. It takes preparation, objectivity, and iteration. But we're free form flowing here. We're brainstorming, we're preaching, we're teaching, we're learning. That's what we're doing. It works like this. Christianity is an idea where our souls are saved, where redemption and life and purpose and meaning and understanding are now available through a certain way, not a system, but a way. And, it's not a guaranteed thing to work. I'm no super Christian. In fact, I'm a Satanist as well as a Christian. I'm a Buddhist as well as a secularist, humanist. I'm just like an actor would be able to put the cloak. It's like a metaphysical cloak. You're wearing that character's affects. Like when Johnny Depp followed Hunter S. Thompson around, fuck man, shit, swooping and screwing, or Jamie Foxx did Ray Charles, or Denzel Washington did Malcolm X. These performances are not just like Gary Oldman did Sid Vicious. Do you know that? And by the way, Lil Bill, who has a misunderstanding about, he put out a video called Punk is Black, and he's right about that. But he's a misunderstanding about the Sex Pistols. Sid Vicious wasn't the Sex Pistols. Sid Vicious came later, okay? It was a very, very short period of time. But Glenn Matlock wrote a lot and played on everything. Well, no, he didn't. Actually, Steve Jones played the bass in the studio. And I think Sid didn't, he couldn't play. Steve Jones would literally turn his amp off on stage. And the whole Sid Nancy thing, Sid stabbing Nancy, she was a schizophrenic that had a penchant for knives. There's a very good chance that this misunderstandings are easy. They're easy. Working through them, not so much. And our biases and preferences can sometimes be difficult to disentangle. The Sex Pistols themselves and that story is what it is. But I'm bringing it up because understanding who plays what part, when, and where in a story is so much more important than what our nature as humans prefers, that of a good story. We want a good narrative. We want things to be objectively presented in our favor. And because there's such a competition for attention, we get what we want. But is it really what you want? Or is it just a distraction that feels like it's what you want? I think the latter describes most of this horse shit. Most of this horse shit out here. But listen, Christianity is an idea to make things very, very simple. That we come from somewhere somehow. That our bodies die, right? But our minds want more than just food. And there's a moderation of physical and spiritual and mental, or there are different ways we could put this, that help us achieve more comfort, joy, understanding, security, and confidence, no less power or motivation or inspiration. We get things that allow us to produce things greater than the sum of the parts that we contribute to it. When we consider that, like, okay, let's talk about faith. Faith is something that no one gets it right. However, if you're walking in a house that you've walked in before and the lights are off and you got to get to the bathroom, maybe you feel along the walls. You know that if you keep walking this way, you're going to feel a wall, and you're going to be able to use it to help you get where you're going, right? You have a belief, but it's based on something. It's not an exercise in obedience. That exercise in obedience is why Satanism is just as valuable as Christianity. It invites people to make a choice, to look at things just a little differently, to see if you can get more out of them. Not more profit, more life, more understanding, more of something that you might not have even understood that was part of life yet. That's part of the appeal, that you're going to find things you've not yet been exposed to. However, that is also very scary, and that's why I say you got to go against the grain of what, reality and normalcy present. It's not all that simple, right? So I don't think I'm going to be able to break it down all right now, and that's what I keep trying to do. Let's pull up our friend Wildman Chris's video. He comes from the Calvinist persuasion, which explains things as good or evil, damned or saved. And I don't know where somebody feels like they can establish, I don't know at what point in history or with what scripture or any, like what are the points that people base the line of authority on that you're going to say you have faith in this? Like, because there's nothing that Paul never says anything. There's nothing that directs people to be stupid. It's the exact opposite. And Islam should do the same thing. Judaism should, and that's why you have the Talmud and the Pentateuch, or like all the stuff. I'm no expert in Judaic study, but the Talmuds, from what I understand, are the beginning of the rabbinic tradition, and the Talmuds are arguments, right? Like like Confucian or Buddhist arguments. Socrates and Plato, you're taking these ideas that might be difficult, you take them to their logical conclusion and see what unintended consequences might spring up and anticipate them. You look for paradoxes and axioms and you try to make sense out of things so that the truth is portable then. But some people, they get so invested, I believe, that then they need to validate their efforts. Just like if you put a bunch of money into some scientific study and you need to realize that you need to have proof that some rib-winged dragonfly from Honduras has the potential to mitigate early onset Alzheimer's or something. And people have contributed tens of millions of dollars, and you're starting to find out that you get nothing. You get nothing. You were so sure, you were so confident, you were so happy to be selling this idea, but now you just need a little more time. Maybe it's not the wings. Maybe there's a precursor. Maybe there's something that synthesizes another, whatever. Maybe this is a weird example, but you don't want to walk away from it. You want to produce something that justifies all the time and energy that you've put into it. This is human nature. And when it comes to religion and power and control, think of the priests of Egypt or the Spanish Inquisition or any number of institutions that have controlled. And communism, Maoist and Leninist communism fit this bill too. It's more about power and control and subservience and instituting a right to demand obedience over some real thoughts and feelings. This is where it goes. If you don't come unto the whole, if you don't look for truth, real truth, then you're left with fetishizing distinctions that pull us into lethality because they're so rigid and wrong that people feel like they have to justify their prior intensity with future intensity, and it's a fucking mess. It's a mess. So bear with me. I'm trying to explain very complicated things. I'm sorry if I come off as a little loose. It's because the territory I'm covering is so expansive and twisted and weird, and it produces such dark things all the time, and it keeps us locked in this state of suspension, and we atrophy and degrade, and we're like content with that. WALL-E, the movie WALL-E with the robot, and you get all the fat people in their little like hover recliners. That is a very charitable take on what we would become given our own preferences. Now they're in outer space and blah 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 blah, but that's us. That's us. Unless you're willing to go against the grain, unless you're willing to ask, where does authority come from? Who gives that person or that word the right to leverage and insist that reality is on its side? You've got Greek Orthodox, you've got Catholic, Roman Catholic, you've got, those, for instance, they say they're the true church. How? Why? The Mormons say the same thing. They trace it back. They say, all the way before Christ, people have always done the same religion since the beginning of time. It's been the same religion. But as the scriptures say, the truth, the one trueness will leave this earth for a time and will be restored in the latter days. So they believe they're the latter-day saints, right? And what I've found recently is Joseph Smith actually had a lot of good ideas that he could not have gotten without Gnostic thought. For real. And like the Melchizedek priesthood, they practice it in Mormonism. That's essentially from Enoch. Joseph Smith most certainly knew his biblical studies. He knew his religions. And as much as a young farm boy could in 1841 or whenever, he studied up real dang good. There are errors of translation. Not errors of translation. There are, the thing that gives Joseph Smith away is his seraphims. Seraphim is the plural of seraph. And there's a mistranslation in the King James Version of, I believe it's in Isaiah. And Joseph Smith just copied that seraphims down. Now it's been corrected now, but there were other ways to prove it too. Joseph Smith there was no Urim and Thummim. There's no direct prophecy. And the reason for that is you can make a case with material things, but the reason for that, which is much stronger, greater, and truer, is that God, or the entirety, or wherever our consciousness and motivation comes from and wants to go back to, is not one who requires the obedience that we see in the Old Testament. This is where a lot of the Gnostic creation myth is a much more preferable explanation, that this jealous God that, is like all this horse shit, and there's so many problems with the God of Genesis. Bad problems. You don't want to be afraid of your God. Now, having humility and awe because something is awesome is different. But this is no mistranslation. Fear and jealousy are the aspects of this God of Israel. He's a bad guy, not a good God. Terrible. And it's not the same as the New Testament. Why? Well, Well, people have all these reasons and explanations, but I say, where does that come from? Well, somebody that I met, someone in my life, my Sunday school teacher, my parents. And that's it. That's it. So then they start to tiptoe outside of that. And that's the choice. That's the good choice. Go against the grain of what is natural to question what obedience and authority really is. Satanism under Anton LaVey in the 60s, this guy was an ex-circus attendant and crime photographer for like the Los Angeles something or other. Anton LaVey he did voiceovers on these VHSs of like dead people. When we were teenagers, these movies called Faces of Death, right? There were these VHSs in the 18 and over section. It's like, oh, dead people. And it always would be like the most terrible decision to have made to watch one of those movies. Terrible, terrible, terrible. But Anton LaVey, who happily did the voiceovers. Anyways, I'm not saying the Church of Satanism is right or anything, but I'm saying that the philosophical and social suggestions have just as much value and utility to who we and what we truly are as any well-meaning Christian, no matter the denomination. If you have a wise person that pulls wisdom out of something, just like you're going to look at a piece of art and you may get something different than somebody else, but what you both get is beautiful. If you can pull utility out of a source and share that, then you know that the person's generally considered to be wise. And if you're in a church or community, there's bound to be a wise person or two. Plus, you're going to be biased depending on the nature of your relationship with people. That's all good and fine. Satanism is just as useful, if not more so, because it's written in modern day, just like the LDS Church, the Latter-day Saints, has a lot of utility because just like America, based off of the governments and power struggles of the past, America could look backwards and use the Athenian tradition, the tradition of both. Anyways, sorry to keep deviating. I want to pull up this video and get rolling before we run out of time. But Satanism is not about worshiping Satan. There's no such thing as Satan. There's literally no such thing as Satan. Satan, there's Satan means adversary in Hebrew. In Job, they talk about it. The Apocrypha and tradition of Apocalyptica and Revelation and prophecy and all that, not until, so this whole idea like all these lefty Satanists worshiping Satan, what the fuck are you talking about? There's no Satan. There is no Satan. So even if you're like a good Christian, where the fuck are you getting this from? The devils and demons and Satan and all this stuff. Where are you getting this from? It's not scripture. So I'm not real sure where you're getting it from. But listen, we got Satan and all the fear and corruption of community and reason that entails. We get Satan and all the fear and corruption of community and reason that we get in favor. We say, yeah, give us that so we can favor control and conformity, right? Because we don't want to go to hell, right? We get all that for not synthesizing with the golden Islamic progress. If we took the traditions and the enlightened values, virtues, and understanding and love of God that was present in Islam once upon a time, I don't know so much anymore. It's all inter-country contest now. It's contest between Jews and Arabs. That's what it is. It has nothing to do with the church, because the church would say, busy yourself with your studies. Look to understand the all. Forgive one another and pull love out of life. This obedience to scripture is not anywhere in any of these books, except by the twisting of man's intent. That's it. And we can roll down any line of authority with any church, going back to Peter with the Catholics, or any church, even go back to Christ, going back through the Jews, even if we're going to pretend that Moses was real, he wasn't. But even if we're going to pretend he was, which, is what we do as humans, we pretend that the story that is most objectively entertaining to our tastes and preferences, whatever moves us the most, that's the truest. Not what checks out the most. We're too lazy to do that. It is what it is. You can't resent things into changing and be like, get behind me, Satan. It's just fucking ridiculous. If Satan's a problem, if he's real, And then maybe, wear your crosses and say your prayers. Like, do the things to mitigate the thing that you fear instead of pushing onto other people their liability to your fear. It's so crazy. If we're going to be reasonable, though, let's trace the line of authority from where it starts to where it goes, and see if your church really does have the authority to speak on the behalf of God. It doesn't. And if you say, "Oh, don't talk about Muhammad. Don't talk about Muhammad." If you do that, then you're just a bad person. No, I'm not. Questioning and reasoning are the things that God has given us. Allah has given us the capacity to reason, to stifle that capacity in favor of obedience to men that keep those laws is not of God's doing. That is the opposite. That is actually what, in Christian or Islamic terms, what satanic business is. You're not honoring the gift of life that you actually carry around with you. You're not justifying your agency and propensity to truth, which, according to Gnostic tradition and my word, truth is reconcilable with the consensus of other honest, good faith, effort-attending people. In other words, people that have made the choice and have felt the conversion of heart. Okay, I don't know if my friend Wildman Chris is here or not, but the conversion of heart is everything. That's why we don't need scriptures. We don't need someone who's like, I'm an ordained blah, 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 blah from the tradition of the Pope or whatever. Like, that's the opposite of the value of God and life and wholeness and truth. And Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, some of Hinduism, some of Confucianism, definitely not legalism. Some of Shintoism, some of Taoism. Like, there's benefits in all of these religions, but none of them are right. And if you were going to pretend that they are, then it inevitably leads to lethality, because it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit in the world, and you have to break things to make it so and control the narrative. And some people get to the point where they think everything is control. I mean, everything is control, so I'm just going to control it before someone else controls it. And then we're back to, oh, we need a Christ or a Messiah to come to save us from this brute physical force of war and warlords and stuff. When salvation, let's see, David himself said, redemption will come today if you hearken unto his voice. That's the light of Christ, my friends. You don't have to be a Christian to understand that there's something inside of us that pulls us towards truth. And when we find truth, it's a comparison. We're like, that checks out. The feeling of deja vu. Look what Carl Jung has to say about that. In the ecclesiastic Gnostic church, which is out of like Hollywood, again, not a true church, but it's closer because it's newer to, some utility for humans. Unitarians, it doesn't work. It's a good idea, but it doesn't work. It's too secular. It's just community with an acceptance, with an eye for universality. So dualism, wrong. No such thing as good and evil. There is the whole. That's it. There is what there is, and what is not is not. That's it. To say things are good and evil is to cut off essentially half of reality. And the goal of life as a mix of material, which is like hume, soul, which is suke, and spirit, which is pneuma. Now, the word pneuma in the scriptures, in the Christian scriptures, this is a Greek word. It makes a lot more sense when you read it from that angle. And I learned this from the Religion for Breakfast guy. Actually, let me read this, and I swear, after I read 1 Corinthians 2, 11 through 13, I will pull up our friend's video. Sometimes the translation of a word ruins the effect, because the Greeks had a good system where you had, like, you think about it like this: hylic, psychic, pneumatic. All right, now we're going to think psychic like Professor X, and pneumatic like with, but just pretend, that we're using them like how they would have used them. When we consider these three aspects of self as physical, life force, because plants have life force too, that's soul. According to the Valentinian Gnostic tradition, you've got these three things, and I happen to roll like this too. You've got psychic, which is just the life force, and then the pneuma. That's the spirit. That's the message from the one, the entirety, God, the thing that makes, I don't know. We don't know until we all come together and we assess it together, period. Whatever problems people have come from not being in the same mind about what things are. You can't force people, though. It's either true or it's not. So, if someone's going to have a conversion of heart and an interest in truth itself, then they're on the path. But if you reject that in favor of what's familiar and obedience, faith-based obedience to an authority that can't justify itself through anything other than force and war and control, then, see the difference? You must make the choice. You must make the choice to get on the path. And that path is not one of obedience. It is one of truth and utility and function and life and vibrancy and love, real love, appreciation, gratitude for even pain. Okay, I live with a lot of pain. I don't think I'm the only one. You live with pain, you deal with it. It's definitely a distraction. This could be why I'm so intense. Everyone's like, dude, just chill. Just fucking be a stupid fuck like me. Like, I ain't got time for that. I don't have time for it. I have good times. I try to relax. I laugh. I love me some Bob's Burgers. I do things to chill, okay? But when you're living with pain and a constant reminder of mortality, one should be so lucky to not have those factors constant. So anyways, here we go. 1 Corinthians 2, 11 through 13. Remember, hylic, physical, psychic, just general life force, and pneumatic is of God. That's that light of Christ. I'm not talking about Jesus, okay? I'm talking about the thing inside of us. Because the idea is that in this world, it's a corrupted version of where we come from. Now, it's beautiful. It's amazing. It's definitely great. It comes from a power greater than any of us have individually. But collectively, we're much more powerful than the God that put this world into order. And we're trying to get back to, and the God that created this world is part of that too. We're all part of the same thing. So it's not like Yildibaoth is evil. It's not like the God of Israel is evil. But it was immature, and just like anything that tries to use control rather than truth to bring about utility and understanding, when you use control and obedience and fear, like fear God, fuck you, fucking fear Allah or whatever. If it's God, it's God. You as a fucking shithead don't get to say that American hypocrisy or something doesn't qualify me to talk about how stupid you are. Like, it's a choice that people make to be smart, kind, and loving, or rigid, inflexible, and insistent upon obedience to some system that they can't even trace back. They can't say this is why it's justified. Islam's got an advantage because Muhammad was like, what, 350 AD or something? He was like, maybe even later than that. I don't know. When was Muhammad on earth? I know I said I promised I'd put this video on, but I'm just so distracted all the time. Later. It was almost 600. Oh, wait, no. BH, what the fuck is... No, 632. 632? Yeah, I mean, that's a hell of an advantage on any other religion. Now, if you look at the Sufis come from the Gnostic tradition and they're Islamic. Again, for those who are just getting here, we get Satan, which there's no such thing in the Bible or anything. Satan just means adversary. It's like it's in Job, adversary. It's not, this whole idea of Satan is not part of Christianity. It's just not. And now you've got people that are like, there's good and there's evil, there's good and there's evil, there's good and there's evil. Fucking insane. We get Satan and all the fear and corruption of community and reason in favor of controlled conformity. We get that for not synthesizing with golden Islamic progress. Because we did not synthesize, we did not make a whole out of what was before disparate. You get these unintended consequences. When people try to assert that this is truth and they're wrong, that's what you get. You get the Canadian schmuck YouTubers out here saying, America, imperialist, Nazi gold, blah, 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 versus the good Soviet, blah, 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 blah. And billionaires, universal health care, blah, 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 blah. Like they're so fixated on being obedient to a system that is in opposition to another system that they don't see that they didn't even come up with this stuff. They're just being obedient to the antithesis of what they think they despise. But they're too lazy to look into that history either. They just look at the effect. They look at the pundits and they say, because the right-wing pundits are terrible. They're like, oh, I made a joke about something. It's all stupid. Biden's old. Hilarious. It's so hilarious, original, and helpful. No, it's not. It's just fucking being a privileged fucking honky. That's it. That's it. All you right-wing, like, that's your political take. I looked at an Alex Jones website like that's a real source. We're going to, tomorrow, right-wing review. Salty Cracker's going to, broken. 1 Corinthians 2:11-13. For what human being knows what is truly human, except the human pneuma. Remember, spirit. And when you use that word pneuma instead of spirit, it makes it a lot more clear that the only other place that this aligns is as this like thing. What is this thing? This like, what is this questioning? Descartes says, I think, therefore I am. What? Cogito ergo sum, or however you say it in Latin. Sorry, I'm a high school dropout. Give me a fucking break, okay? Ergo cogito sum, whatever. I think, therefore I am. There's something more to us, and like in Descartes' fifth meditation, I think he talks about being able to picture what's perfect, even though at that point there's nothing perfect. We imagine what's perfect. We use instruments and we try to create things that are perfect, even though in nature, what is perfect on its own, not by like symmetrical, consistent design. Like we're just now beginning to understand more and more about the real nature of material and how it breaks down or doesn't, or breaks down. Always, entropy is always in effect. So when you make this word spirit, pneuma, it's a lot easier to see that its application is really just that extra something, right? That's something that we can't really explain. But the more you pay attention to it and the more you value and prioritize it, the stronger it gets, the better it gets, and the more you can see it in other people that can see it in you. And that doesn't matter if you're Muslim or Christian. And in the West anyways, not in Israel, but in America with Jews, they too. Muslims, Christians, Jews, this is how we roll. Monotheists roll like this, and you look at other people that have had that conversion. It doesn't matter what church they go to. It's not about the obedience to authority. Yes, even in Islam, especially in Islam, you've got more reasonable. Once you make the choice to be a better person, that's what the choice is for. It's not about, and this is what ruins organized religion, it's not about obedience to an authority that cannot demonstrate its, where its authority came from. It's just, I'd say so, just because. For what human being knows what is truly human, except the human pneuma that is within? So also no one God comprehends what is truly God's, except, oh shit, I wrote this so silly. Let's do it like this. I'm just going to look up 1 Corinthians. I wrote it all like a 60s promo poster, and all the letters are all squished together. 1 Corinthians. Yeah, I need 11 through 13. Let's see if Super Google can bring me what I need. Okay. For who knows a person's thoughts except their own pneuma within them? Yeah, this is the new Bible. That's what my friend Wildman Chris asked what Bible somebody was using, because he was getting like a Son of the Dawn Star, something that was like not in Romans. I don't remember what it was supposed to be from, but I looked it up later, and it's because it's from the New King James, which is like, I don't really understand that too much. King James, there we go. For what man knoweth the things of a man, save the pneuma of man which is in him? For what man knoweth the things of a man? What do we know? How do we know anything about people themselves except through the spirit of man, the pneuma of man, which is in him. Created in God's image. It's there from the beginning. That's that spark, that divine spark, a piece of the luminaries. It needs to come back together. Many things can be one at the same time. It doesn't lose its identity because it's part of a greater thing. In fact, its identity is based on that greater thing. So again, for what man knoweth the things of a man, save the pneuma of man which is in him? Even so the things of God knoweth no man, but the pneuma of God. Even so the things of God knoweth no man, but the pneuma of God. This translation is weird. Try this. For what human being knows what is truly human, except the human pneuma that is within? So also no one comprehends what is truly God's except the pneuma of God. Now we have received not the pneuma of the world, but the pneuma that is from God, so that we may understand the gifts bestowed on us by God. And we speak of the things in words, not taught by human wisdom, but taught by the pneuma, interpreting pneumatic things to those who are pneumatic. I hope that makes sense. Scriptures are so difficult, but we don't understand anything but for that questioning and more interesting aspect of ourselves. And it does appear that some have more or less of that spark. Now, I would assert that as we attend that spark, it may grow. Just like, a lot of parents, a lot of wise people that I referenced at the beginning would give impression. They'd say, you've got two wolves inside of you or whatever, right? You got two wolves inside of you. You got a good one, you got a bad one. And whichever one you feed is the one that wins. It's the same thing. The more we pay attention to something, the more likely it's going to take up more and more of our field of vision. But when it comes to a love of what is good and true and wise, pondering the nature of God, not conforming to some authority. It is a constant temptation, ironically, to conform to certainty. But part of our pneumatic value is there is no certainty in this realm, in this life. There is no certainty. And in Buddhism, they talk about a constant state of reincarnation because of a clinging unto life. It's the constant cycle of death and rebirth, constant, because you're like, oh, I need. A lot of different religions come up with very similar things. Like I said, I'm a high school dropout, and I've not read or this or have not watched that before, but a lot of the things that I'll have said or a lot of the beliefs that I have will come out of someone else's mouth too. And that confirmation is what we're doing here. We're trying to assemble enough pieces where we should be. Why do I have a red square? Is the stream interrupted? No, it says excellent condition. Okay. All right. Okay. We're going to get into Wild Man Chris here. No one's here. Fuck all you motherfuckers. That actually makes me feel better. We got shit to do here. We got shit to do. We got stuff to understand. We have lessons to share. We have understanding that we need to share. And that doesn't happen without engagement. Everyone is so used to this contest for clout or influence or whatever. For what purpose? For what purpose? What is the objective reason in getting the clout? You guys think that if people know who you are, you have a career? You have money then? Like this sick fantasy about succeeding in being seen as important as UC, say, Vosh or someone like that. If you can succeed in achieving the same importance, then your place in the community is safe. You're looking for security, not truth, not function. And it's an illusion anyways, because he doesn't fucking care about you. He says, oh, why are the cops doing this Cop City thing? Because they hate you. And Vosh hates you. These fucking people don't care about you. They do not care about you. I care about you. I legitimately care about you. I want you to be as good as you can be. I want you to understand all that is available to you to understand. I want you to have a good relationship with your family. I want you to have confidence in why you would get involved in politics or not, because you don't have to. This assertion that if you're not involved like me, then you're a bad person is wrong. Involvement is a very personal decision, you know, and every day is different. Some people live with pain, you know, and that alters their experience. Pain is life is pain, okay? I mean, to some extent. So the contrast of pleasure is, it makes sense that some people will pursue that endlessly, because to them, with the contrast of pain, which could be mental anguish, it could be spiritual pain, it could be environmental stress and trauma, but you're looking for pleasure in some sense of the word to escape. And you continue compulsively to seek it out because it provides you certainty, or the illusion of certainty. And so too do these cults that you conform to and super chat to and anticipate, etc., etc. You get religion wrong. You get religion wrong. That's the problem. All of you get religion wrong. All of you. In fact, ain't nobody here, so fuck it. I ain't doing nothing nice. Although I do care about you, you ain't here, so who the fuck am I talking to? Let's pull up this Sam Harris video. And let's consider what he gets wrong.
If you could have dinner with anyone, who would it be?
Let me call Jeremy real quick. Jeremy, what up, man?
Hey, Luda, what's going on?
This is the question. If you could invite anyone to dinner, who would it be?
I don't know, like a culinary genius?
That's good.
Yeah, I like that.
Definitely no actors. I think they're all a little bit weird, you know? Wait, I thought you guys said dinner wasn't happening.
All right, bye, Jeremy. Join us at the...
What I want to argue tonight is that how we talk about belief, how we fail to criticize the beliefs of others, has more importance to us personally, more consequence to us personally, and to civilization.
He gets it right from the beginning, though. How we fail to criticize other people, other people's beliefs, their mistakes, their misapprehensions, their toxicity, their poisoning of things that would otherwise be fruitful. Criticizing people that get it wrong is a good thing. That's not division. My ire and my anger at you is righteous. It is just. But you're so closed down. Your hearts and minds are so hardened. You don't feel what's real. You've prioritized feelings over reality. But even in that regard, you fail. Because your feelings are shallow, predictable, and fleeting at best. And I would expect that they're not even that interesting. That you are failing. So the evangelical fire that some preachers deliver is just. This is all about justice. It is 100% about justice. And when you identify with that, when you have that conversion of heart, and you give your life to all of nothing but truth and justice, you will understand where this gets ugly, where this gets bad, and where the fucking YouTube schmucks, the Canadian fucking Majority Report dick riders, the fucking this cult or that cult. I could go down the line, but I'm so tired of alluding to them, even though I know that's where people are. What few people are brave enough to come out here and engage and test assumptions or ridicule people that are fucking outright ridiculous. That in and of itself is what gets imitated. And the cause, the reasoning that was there from the beginning, no, that's not it anymore. The practice of criticizing other people's beliefs is essential to a harmonious society. Criticizing misapprehended, misinformation, all these things that are so common now is a must. So you get a lot of these people out there that know the framework, but not the function. And this is a problem. So Harris is right in many ways, as usual. criticizing people's beliefs is a necessary part of a peaceful and golden society. Fuck you.
Than perhaps anything else that is in our power to influence.
A friend of mine, Noam Chomsky, said to me once that he doesn't care what people believe, it's what they do that matters, and that's true. The problem is what you believe affects what you do. If every person was an island and didn't have an impact, it wasn't a parent or a teacher or have influence of others, I wouldn't care what people believed. So the problem is when people take precepts based on things that are clearly wrong, doctrines that are clearly wrong. Say, for example, that homosexuality is evil. A precept written in a book that codified the beliefs of illiterate peasants in the Irish.
No, it doesn't say homosexuality is evil. That's what men say. That's what humans say after the fact. Man lying with man, man lying with beast, all that horse shit is such a teeny little fucking snippet that is contradicted in so many other places. If you're going to fetishize text out of context without considering how maybe in Coptic, Hebrew, Aramaic, some of these words in their original context may have presented a different take than what you're getting based off of what you're working with now. No. You don't consider that. You go straight for the jugular. This idea is wrong on both sides. These new atheists, him saying he's friends with Noam Chomsky right there gives the whole fucking game away. What intellectual is friends with Noam Chomsky? Noam Chomsky is a fool. He's a failed scientist that got like 2 things right maybe once. But no, he's a fool. He's no intellectual. He's a poisoner of intellect. He's someone that goes to the well, he goes to the gnosis well, and he just drops these little poison tablets. He's so fucking wrong, so wrong. And this guy, Cross or whatever, he's not terrible, but this is the problem of the new atheists. They will say, oh, this, I just don't think that's right because secular, rational reason goes like this. But what they're doing is they're just being snotty. They're just being snotty. They're just being like what President Sunday wishes he was. They're like a real intellectual. So people imitate the affects. They don't listen to the words. The very first sentence was, we must criticize one another's beliefs, right? That guy gets it right. Sam Harris gets it right. The second guy's not wrong, but he's about typical. He's not an intellectual. He's about typical for how the smarter of the online people are. He would probably balk at mannerisms that ran contrary to what decorum would anticipate. I mean, I don't know anything about this guy anymore. I've seen him on a lot of these compilations, but new atheism fucked a lot of y'all's heads up. You took the baby and you threw it out with the bathwater because a few fucking dick swinging honkies got up there and said some shit that made sense. And you're like, oh, sense. You're so thirsty for sense and reason that now all you're doing is fetishizing the form. And the form is even misunderstood. So it's over and over and over and over again. If you don't want to be like that, if you don't want to be like that, don't be. The reason you feel so hollow is because you are. And that's a choice. You make that choice. So just like you can make that choice and work your way into a habitualization of mediocrity, to put it charitably, you so too can make a series of choices to be a different way. It doesn't happen all at once, but we are blessed and fortunate enough to have a point of communication with something greater than just the material. Now, that's not to say an open line where you're like, yes, God. The nature and existence of God is an entirely different conversation, one which care and deliberation should be given to. Criticizing those beliefs is the same thing as the Socratic process, right? You can do it with respect or disrespect. That's up to you. But I will get an indication of where people are at depending on how serious they take. People will simplify. They'll be very, very crass. Be crass. Let's look up crass, okay? Let's look up crass. Just in case President Sunday watches this so he can actually learn something. Lacking sensitivity, refinement, or intelligence. Huh. Yeah, how about that, huh? Stupid, insensitive, blundering, dense, thick, vacuous, mindless. Yeah, that's the deal, man. That is the deal. If you are a crass fucking asshole like President Sunday and like a lot of other people out here, but he's just a very, very stereotypical kind that misses things and then holds it against other people, that's the problem. You're so insecure to begin with. You're so thirsty for reason and rationality that when you get your hands on something that appears to do that, you cling to it. And therefore, you let the value slip between your fingers. It squeezes out. It's liquid. Okay, it's nebulous. It's very, very versatile. Right? It takes the shape of what it needs to be. Where it needs to be, how it needs to be. This willful ignorance that we are up against here is so formidable that if we were to ascribe the moniker adversary or Satan to a constant aspect of our existence, it would be willed ignorance, willful ignorance, the hard hearts of mankind, okay? Man, woman. I'm sorry if I don't make that correction. I'm not trying to make anyone feel less than. But when we say men, when we say like of all mankind is the implication. Human, right? Human. Maybe if I say human. But fetishizing the text is not the advice of any scripture that wise people honor. And considering uneducated people that find small comfort in fantastical notions, that's no great evil. Could it produce, like Harris is about to get into, could it produce effects that can be traced back to unjustified belief? Yeah, that's what we do. That's what we're doing. Not just as not just participants in the political discourse, but as a true and real intellectual, which if you have the guts to come unto me, I would suggest that we are both well on our way. You can claim if you want. Most people don't want to be caught identifying as an intellectual, but it takes work. It takes work so that you can resist bad information that's meant to manipulate, or its outcome is a manipulation of circumstances. We're living in a very unique day and age right now where we can observe so many different trends and patterns that we would never be able to observe before because we have collective data. We have a better understanding, not a perfect understanding, not even a refined understanding, but we have bits of data that we can use to get somewhat of a collective understanding. And then we can use that to make models, like climate modeling software and whatnot. Or finance management software, investment, hedge funds management stuff. We'll use complex algorithms and software to manage this stuff. You know what? I'm just so disillusioned with people. My heart is so full of hate for people. And it's not because of any physical feature. It's not because people are mean to me or anything like that. It's because people are willfully ignorant and smarmy as fuck without having one iota of a justification for representing themselves with that much cockiness. They have cockiness to no end, but they despise confidence well earned in other people. They see it as an affect of right wing, this, that, or the other. And right wing, what is right wing? Is it just like Salty Cracker saying, is that what right wing is? Because I understand if that's what's driven one to despise, but that's not right wing. That's, again, you are missing an opportunity to synthesize. We have this partisan shit show because of the missed opportunity for synthesis. We use these distinctions that other people have confidence in as the reasoning without actually checking to see where it connects. It's just groupthink and confirmation bias generated by people that may have had a just bit of confidence that we imitate. See how nice I am? I said we. I'm guilty of that from time to time as well. But I make the effort. I try, and not so I can brag about it, but so that afterwards I can say, listen, this is what I came up with. I believe this. And if you were in attendance, if you were present, you would either gain the utility that I'd achieved through work and contrast and care, or you would perceive an error in my reasoning and do what is actually righteous and criticize my beliefs. You can come at it with any attitude that you want. You can come at it with any affect that you want, but it's the function of what you're saying, not the form, that will have the effect on me, because I'm no fucking fool like so many other people are so content to be. Being crass and cocky is okay, but being confident and true is not.
Iron Age, and somehow we're supposed to use it as a basis of morality today. It's just an empirical fact.
No, it's not the basis. It is not the basis. No simple-minded fool will use this as the basis of their morality. They will use it as a validation for the morality. Something that is there inherently will be what it is. When we have a description that better describes what is there, then we may further investigate that understanding and gain further utility. And the more of us that come together and work for and earn and gain that consensus, the better that understanding will be. The more deserved our joy, happiness, pleasure, the truer our gnosis will be. Conjuring certain spirits of reverence, the Eucharist and things like that, that we're not going to deal with that here today. If people really, or the very nature of Islam and why Harris is going to get into it, you have so many bloody and brutal. Islam is not so good, man. Yeah, I mean, like there's just like Judaism isn't when we're talking about the areas that it's native to. Now, if you look at people who live, say, in France, where they're trying to like ban certain religious wear and stuff, you're going to find a much more even keel conversation. But every time you get all the white people sounding like, oh, these Muslims are just terrorists, then you justify what the extremist fundamentalist asshole versions of that religion will look at as having known from the beginning. That confirms their bias. It's the same thing as people doing with religion or with politics now, saying, oh, it's a right wing, or you get religion wrong, or, like you're so arrogant, or one of these things that then dismisses having to evaluate the substance itself. I mean, of course, there's more. I say it's the same thing. It's the same thing, but the priority to produce terror, fear, control, leverage of power in one of those dilemmas is much stronger than the other. But to pretend like this is all just like what you get. It's what you get when colonizers blah 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 is so fucking wrong. That it's like saying the priests in the Catholic Church that diddle little boys. That that's what you get when you blah 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 blah. Even if that's so, that should be what the focus is on. Why are you going to such great lengths to find this moderated middle that's based off of worse? It's mediocrity if you're at good. It's much sicker and lethal and deadly and traumatizing, more likely than not. A failure to synthesize when the opportunity and the invitation is open, and looking for a middle when there's just evil, when there's just something that could be described. Okay, evil in the sense of the Bible is not real. Talking about a dualistic separation of good, evil, light, and dark is just a means for us to establish, brainstorming. We're just trying to get shit out on the table and see what we can construct and then observe. Let me check something here real quick. I felt a presence. I felt a presence. Just kidding. I forgot what I was saying. Okay, fuck. Fetishizing function that doesn't bear out requires a grip that always breaks what would otherwise be lovely. He's talking about basing morality off of that's just wrong. That's no one is tabula rasa. Nobody. There's going to be something written on you, whether it's the syncopations of your mother's heartbeat from being in utero. There's going to be something that creates or catalyzes or perpetuates something that like ripples on a pond will keep. There's some point or thing that creates what comes later. Always, okay? There's cause and effect, right? In philosophical terms, the big question is, what was the original cause, right? Well, Gnostic creation myth, I think, does a pretty good job of explaining things, at least better than the stuffy, stodgy scriptures that people have become accustomed to using. As far as the mannerisms and affects of certain sects, like Judaism versus Islam in the Middle East and North Africa, that shit is toxic as fuck because it's all about the law. It's all about the law, the Torah or the Quran, and their direct words from God, which is like compete much, It's all a competition to justify a series of dogma that just aren't real. They're just not real. And if you say that and prove it, they might kill you. I mean, Mossad's probably not going to kill you unless you actually go after one of their citizens. But in Islam, they will. And it's not even like a religious thing. It's a human thing. It's a human thing. If people were really pondering the nature and existence of Allah, then they would not do the things that they do. And other Muslims understand this very, very well, right? We just don't listen to them because it's not entertaining. It's not interesting. It's not as salacious. It's not as colorful. And that is the problem. Hardened hearts and minds can be turned into something much more vicious and disgusting when a validating framework of authority is given as the proper explanation. People would use it as an excuse, not instruction. If morality were really their interest, the choice to be more moral would bring them along the path, you fucking academic Noam Chomsky fucking butt fucking asshole. Like, it's not the way it is. That's not anybody who cares about morality, no matter what you use, is making a good choice. Chemical imbalances, material insecurity, and other factors come in later, come in for different reasons in different ways, and those are very real. But to generalize in such a crass and ridiculous way as to say that the morals and the teachings in the Bible, the Quran, any number of religious texts are the complete point zero for people's morality and ethics is just ignorant. And you could tell this guy was raised in a household where his parents voted Democrat or whatever and gave to PBS and shit. And it's not moral luck. That's called conditioning. You must make the choice to be moral. Just like people in religions. The converts are the best. They're always the best because they made the choice. They made the choice. It's all about choice.
That not only is it not unnatural, it's not evil. It's not unnatural. If you take, for example, sheep, 10% of sheep have long-term homosexual relationships. They don't even have a soul to go to hell. So it's certainly not unnatural. And so the problem is that the real.
Again, exactly. We don't use scripture. We don't use religion to invent morality. We use it to understand morality. And morals are a part of the human pneuma? Suke? Pneuma? I think you say it's pneuma, not pneuma. Morality, ethics, and wanting more for our children, for our families, for ourselves is not wanting the whole pie to ourselves, because sharing pie, having enough pie and having people to share that experience is a higher version of enjoyment than having the whole pie yourself. Okay, that's just one example. It doesn't matter what you read about the pie before. You'll find this out if you're experiencing it yourself. Now, could you save time in that journey if your parents or say the church or society you come from have worked out some of these things with a good faith effort towards truth and utility? Yeah, because if you're born and they say, hey, look, you know what's really good? That pie's delicious, but what's even better is having good company, getting to share a dessert, you know? And what's even better is a little whipped cream. Well, other people don't like whipped cream. Okay, well, that's fine. You don't have to have it. Me thinking that this makes it better doesn't mean that everyone must have whipped cream because that's the best, right? Establishing truth is very much so baby bathwater and also personal, you know, objective, subjective. There's no one thing that is true. It is a conjunction of interconnected causes and effects that bear out in front of us. And if we're going to believe something that differs from what's observable, in other words, if belief is at odds with process, then we must consider that God has no intention of us prescribing to the thing that is not real. That is a hard heart and mind. If there is a real impression, if there's a real sensory input that informs you that this thing is like these sheep are like, I'm curious about sheep. Do they actually like consummate the union? Like, or are they just like I'm curious about that. I know that homosexuality exists in nature because humans are nature, but it's like, of course there's no evil because it happens. And even if it didn't happen, someone did it, it happens then. You can't say it didn't happen or it's wrong or it happens. It's not just a matter of deal with it. It's understand it. Understand it. Then you will have achieved gnosis. But this motherfucker is thinking about things in like that President Sunday way where it's like, if it's not registered here, then you cannot say anything about that because you're not qualified. And I'm going to out you to everyone. But if you know my name, bring it on, bitch. Oh, man, it was so terrible. So terrible. He's such a bad human. I don't even care about that other girl. She's snotty. She's snotty as fuck. Super snotty, and she's married, but she would fuck Destiny in a heartbeat. I know it. These people are all about the cult of personality and confirmation bias. That's it. It's groupthink and confirmation bias over and over and over and over and over again. And there are people who put out good content, but they are restricted by performative expectations. The quality of their information or personality or speech or any of that matters very little. Very, very, very little. You may in observation say, oh, they have a good sound of voice or something to that effect. But you are so used to having your preferences catered to that you will only give attention and validation to that which goes out of its way to seem as if you are the number one customer. And it's not that form that should validate interest in you. That shouldn't be the indication to tell whether something is in good faith or really genuinely concerned with your well-being. You don't do that by their performative nature. That's how salespeople work. That's how lawyers work. All right. Now, lawyers are representatives in some cases, not all or even most, but in many cases, they are representatives of rhetoric and argument. Right? That's not the same thing as gnosis, truth, and wisdom. It is the appearance of, and as the appearance is more effective than actual reason, that's what we use. There's an incentive to use what works. All right. Part of being wise is understanding that too, but making a different choice for yourself if you expect to tell yourself that you are doing what you can as Even if you're just a body, if you're concerned with morality or ethics, this is not obedience to a phony authority. This is obedience to what is. Do we have a nature? Do we create our nature? Is it the journey or the destination? All of these things are aspects of pondering the nature and existence of God. But this guy, I mean, he's not terrible. It didn't bother me when I heard it before, but it's really fucking with me now.
The problem is when people take beliefs that are clearly based on things which are incompatible with reality, not only believe them themselves, but try and enforce them upon others. You see it everywhere. I certainly see it in my country, where people view religious freedom as the right to impose.
Canadian. He's Canadian. That's the fucking problem. I don't know what you Canadians do in school up there where you're like, oh, we're so good. Tell me about how everyone else is unethical except for us. Remember that time that the United States didn't want Russia to get grain because they were starving their own people, and we gave it to them, and it ruined the power dynamic, and then they thought they could get whatever they wanted because we're moral and ethic and blah, 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 blah. You talk too much. It's such a crock of hypocrisy. It's so fucking backwards how they think. Canadians, y'all, you don't have to be that way. Make a choice to find the real middle if that's what you're trying to find. If you're trying to be fair and live and let live, or be wise, or I don't know what you're trying to do, but make what you're trying to do known, at least to yourself, because as it is, you're just imitating something. And I'm not sure where the source is. I'm not real sure what the cause is, but the effect is uniform. Y'all Canadian YouTubers fucking suck.
Impose their beliefs on other people. And that is just obviously an oxymoron. That and the fact that religion...
Now, imposition, I think, needs to be clarified, because Harris just said the right thing. These new atheists aren't all talking about the same morality. See how very, very different and at odds this is when you dig into it? He's saying, oh, I think it's very wrong, that imposition of blah, blah, blah. What is imposition? Is that a physical or mental thing? Because Harris's suggestion that that I believe is right, and I would impose this belief on other people, is to question people's beliefs publicly, explicitly. There's no like, oh, we don't talk politics and religion. Fuck that. That's the same thing as the boomers talking about not talking about money. Don't talk about money. It's not decorum. Fuck that. That's how we get paid less and labor gets abused. Some exploitation is fine if it's not hurting people. Generating value where there was none before and not giving it to everyone equally is not evil. If you have your needs met, then wealth should be generated. This is so, it's not this fucking no-brainer Canadian YouTuber take where it's like, all corporations are billionaire evil people and blah, blah, blah. That's what I'm saying. This dude, he probably grew up in a very left-wing environment because he's not consistent. Harris is coming from a different, I think he's actually Jewish. So he understands the nature of the law. I mean, this guy might be too, I don't know, but Harris strikes me as someone that came from a more challenging background, challenging metaphysically. So question other people's beliefs. Piss them off. Because if their belief is really sound, then that shake-up, that challenge, will help fortify them in it. Otherwise, they will defer to the authority of men, and they'll say force and strength is the way that you justify that belief. Now, force and strength imposed on others because of a busted belief system is one thing. Imposition, on the other, is such a gray area that people, because listen, man, this guy on the screen, he's not like, he might be really smart, I don't know, but people will imitate that affect and they get it wrong. And then they stick to it, they cling to it because outside of that, they're uncertain, they're not confident. So they have to overcompensate for their insecurity and project proactively onto you why you're trying to derail them from how they want to be seen. And now we're into Lacanian psychology. But, it is what it is or it isn't. It's one or the other. And words matter. That's not to say you have to get the definition right according to what, in Belgium in 1920 they thought the word meant. I'm saying that if it's representative of, like he's talking about homosexuality, it's not evil. Number one, because evil is not a word unless we're considering being willfully ignorant and destructive to what we could and should otherwise love, right? I mean, there are things that are in opposition to what perhaps should be, but that's not evil. It's something different. It's a problem. It's a corruption of the entirety, what it would otherwise be. Many people that go to jail because they weren't raised right. They weren't given, and that doesn't mean their parents didn't love them, but they didn't get the right type of love. They didn't get the right type of stimulus. And who can tell what the proper objective needs are of a human? We're still trying to figure this out, and that's the point. So question people's beliefs. Nobody has the right to assume everyone be reverent about something that is at heart dysfunctional. But even if it is functional, if someone's irreverent about that, then we should live in a society where we can ignore them. But really, if there's truth to what we're representing, then the person's complaint can be countered. However, groupthink and confirmation bias create these personalities like Salty Cracker. We're like, oh, you ready for this to be memory hold? False flag operations so Democrats can get elected and they can blame Republicans for, it's all so fucking funny. Listen to my funny voice. It's fucking retarded, man. It's retarded. That's willful ignorance, and the smarmy, shitty, crass personality does a disservice to your intellect. You're pandering. And you're fucking doing everything wrong just for what? Approval? For distraction? A culture war? Out of opposition? Out of resentment for the other side? I mean, like, those are the only reasons. The reasons, they're not good. They're not good reasons. You could be goofy. You could be silly. You could make fun of things. You could be clever. But that's not what you're doing. You're playing into propaganda that is very, very similar to... I hate to make this comparison, but to the Nazis. The same sentiment, the same tension, and the same ridiculous, hatred for opposing. And it wasn't just like, I disagree with how you think the money should be spent on the government, because they didn't have any in Weimar, right? It was, whose fault is this? What complicated manipulations of ideology are we supposed to just swallow today? Like, it's that anticipation of something much more sinister than just you not getting how many different contextual things fit into that. See, like, we're looking for the actual whole, not the whole, the entirety, right? To a holistic and comprehensive set of perspectives that help inform, illustrate what's there, so that we can make reference to it collectively, individually. It's going to hold up. That's the idea. Not to undergird people that have broken off from each other and are telling two different, at the very least, there's more than two, but you're telling two different stories, both delusional, that its entire purpose is to be in opposition to the other side, which isn't even the side. Like, you're thinking about this as opposition to the side, where people think Biden is left wing, and they're like, it's the left, the satanic left. It's so funny. It's so funny. Satanic leftists. Impose away, okay? Impose. But if you're wrong on purpose for a laugh, then I will fucking pummel you. All right? You don't get to exist out here in this space without me registering my complaint. Ain't no one gonna listen, so don't worry. But I'll be right. And that's why they relegate me to the shadows. They fear me, and they do not have the patience to deal with reality. So, until I start coming out with fucking fart jokes and based memes, we're gonna be based. It's all about the
is associated with morality are the two biggest problems. That people seem to feel they need religion to have morality, and if you don't have religion, you are immoral. And in this country, that just means people can say bad things about you, but in other countries, it means you'll be killed.
He's wrong about everything there except the last sentence. It's not a binary where everything he said is absolutely fallacious, but in its entirety. And the argument that he's representing is wrong. It's wrong. It's wrong. People don't use religion to invent morality, and people don't assert that if you don't have religion, you're immoral. There may be individuals that do that, but in no way, shape, or form are you representing anything like the majority of folks that when you say that. Not even half of the people. You can find people that have weird opinions, but these Canadian YouTubers, like this guy's a precursor to, will use the extreme examples to then generalize. And they say, oh, these Nazis are always generalizing. It's problematic.
Is perhaps, in my mind, the worst part of religion. If we could just take back morality and equate that with rational humanism, then religion would be impotent, and then it would be fine if people believed the fairy tales they believed.
So what is belief?
Well, he had a point there, okay? He did have a point in that if people prioritized secular, rational humanism, which humanism is not a simple word. You do have to put some caveats on it. You don't have to, but you should put some caveats on there. Myth is so much more powerful than fact. So there's no like order that you can put fact and myth in for one to work out, for myth to work out, right? It needs to be tethered. It needs to be tethered. But think about comics or movies or, you know, like Star Wars, like this good versus evil. Like for some reason, it speaks to something inside of us. A desire to organize certainty in regard to our archetypes. This is Jungian philosophy, right? That our subconscious speaks of something greater than our conscious mind has access to. Now, people will take that way too far, but sometimes you have to go too far. Like William Blake says, the palace of wisdom is on the road of excess, right? You don't know what's too much until you've had enough. Or you don't know what's enough until you've had too much. You know, this is where we find the synthesis. Synthesis equals gnosis, the entirety, things coming back into themselves like they want to, When you find things that don't want to, you have to ask, am I right? And that is a questioning to beliefs that we should be constantly applying to ourselves. He's so backwards about all that. He is right that other countries, he's one of these guys, this is why I think he was raised in a left-wing environment. He's one of these guys that sees the extreme examples that are assigned to the right, deservedly so. And then he'll just assume that that's what we're up against. That's not what we're up against. And the human experience is not a rational humanist experience unless you're considering the human to be made out of something more than material. To understand a human truly, one must consider the subconscious. One must consider our history, our past, cause, and effect. One must consider the thesis, the antithesis, and the synthesis of all things external, internal, singular, collective, right? And the more we do, the more we understand how the more of the entirety that we've assembled, the closer we are to truth. And that truth is a representation of something that we kind of have an internal confirmation mechanism for. You know, it's not perfect, but when we use other people who have practiced questioning beliefs, then we make much more progress than just asking ourselves, is that right or not? The more important and the more significant your observations are relative to the entirety, the more that you have a responsibility to bring that to me and to somebody, okay, to somebody. But to me, this is the time. Let me say this very clearly. It's weird, I'm sure, to hear somebody come relatively out of nowhere and start just hitting the internet really hard with constant assertions of what might sound like self-importance. But ask yourself, what do I get out of this? What benefit do I get from telling this story? Is it the 0 watchers? Is that the benefit? Let's check. Who's that hate this? Oh, someone's here. Was for 3 minutes and 42 seconds. Jack Moody. Well, it looks like Jack Moody hit the road, but Jack, are you still here? I can give you an answer if you are, but it's not an easy question to answer. Excuse me. Yeah, that's difficult. Listen, people come in and out here. They don't subscribe. They don't give likes. They drop these questions and they leave, and it upsets me. It's very, very frustrating. This is an example of people's hearts and minds being hardened. You're looking for confirmation bias. You're looking to imitate whatever group you think can speak, relative to authority. Where does authority come from? Who gets to say, like, if you're not an atheist, if you're a theist per se, what is that? How is that much more certain than being an atheist? Those are the questions. Like, what determines what these parameters are shaped by? Are you a Christian, Jack? I would love to know that. Are you a Christian, my friend? I need to know. You asked me a question, I answered. I'd love to get an answer from you. The answers from both parties, which presumably you'd have a bunch of people, that would be great. Have 1,000 people all hoping to learn something together. That would be the ideal, right? So, like, I'm an idealist. How about that? And a truth teller. I don't lie. I don't know. Is there such thing as an atheist prophet? I am a prophet. And I was just in the middle of saying, I understand that if somebody comes out, starts hitting the internet hard, like, listen, this is important, you're wrong, I'm right, you're getting everything wrong. I understand why that might, like, ruffle some feathers. But ruffling the feathers then lets us clean the whole bird. It gets all the fleas and the ticks, the parasites that have made themselves quite comfortable under that fluff. It gets them to disembark from that host, and that's what we want to do. We want to find what our true nature is, and we want to bring that up to a level that allows us to get through some of the shit that we're stuck in right now. We're stuck in a lot of conflict, misunderstanding, tensions keep rising and rising and rising, while misunderstandings and goofy sons of bitches come around and be like, oh, that's everyone that's on the right. Whereas on the left, they're like, you're evil. And both sides are just so. My goal is to get people to just sit down and work through this shit. They don't have to do it in a way that's perfect, but they just have to make the choice to try, instead of just looking for an easy answer that they can then pass on and be like, are you pro or anti? Are you yes or no? And then take it and run. But these thoughts and feelings, these are important. So listen, what I am is the Antichrist. I'm the one who makes the way for the real deal. He's a coming. But you all misunderstand him. Everybody out there misunderstands it. We've had many of opportunities to synthesize. Like I said earlier, we got Satan, which isn't a thing. Satan's not a thing. It's in Job for like a minute, and it's lowercase. So it means adversary in Hebrew. It's like nothing. There's no Satan. There's no hell. There's no devils. All that stuff gets invented later. Like, really, this isn't my opinion. This isn't some hot take. This is real. There's no Satan or devils or anything. Lucifer, who fell from heaven with a third of the host of heaven, or presumably in the great battle before we came to earth. That's something. Maybe, perhaps, there's a little something there. We make some assumptions that Lucifer was what embodied the snake in the Garden of Eden. But where Gnostic ideology, which predates Christianity, comes from, says that snake was a good guy. All right. And they don't say it was snake. I think they say it was Sophia, wisdom, that came to them and said, listen, this is knowledge. Knowledge is good. Your God that's telling you to be afraid of it and that it's a jealous God and to have no other gods before them or I'll strike you down and all this terrible, monstrous stuff. That's not your God. That's essentially your brother. It comes from the entirety as well. But it decided to go off and try to, do its own thing without the rest of its entirety. And that's why our world is not perfect. It's a corrupted version of what could be. And we have an impression of the entirety in our hearts. We know truth. We know wisdom. We've got the opportunity to say, yes, this is good. Yes, this is bad. Now, it takes work refining your understanding, but this is what religion is. This is what morality is. And I think the more pertinent question is one more moral? Do we find that individuals, as a trend, do we find that that people are more moral when they're religious or atheist? I think that's a more important question than if one is an atheist or not. That presumes that someone is something. Are you a Republican? Like that's not the way us humans are designed. You may have voted Republican or Democrat, but that doesn't make you a Democrat. Now, if someone registers as a Democrat, I guess technically it does, but still, you're not a Democrat. You're just someone who's registered Democrat because you vote Democrat, and your state may require you to register Democrat to vote in primaries or something. But to reduce us to being what we do, that's not good. And it's simple and it hurts us. It just sucks that people hit the road in here. Look, man, so much of this is so important. It's so important, especially if you are a believer. If you're someone that believes in some type of religion and you come in here for a second and then hit the road, nah, you ain't religious. You're an imitator and you're a faker. You're a phony and you got a lot of work to do. But we do that by choice. We do that by making the choice. We seek out the conversion of heart. These individuals bring up good points, but please don't say that I'm this or that without understanding what defines this or that. We must define the words that we're asking an answer for. Like if you say, are you an atheist? What does that mean? Are there many varieties? Are there other options on the menu, or is it just atheist and theist? Like there are answers, but everyone's going to have different answers. So you need to provide yours before expecting an answer of substance, especially as it regards to life, the universe, and everything.
Well, beliefs are representations of the world, clearly. They're mental representations of the world, but they're not only that. A belief is a representation of the world which is taken to actually represent the world, which is to say, it's taken to be true. This is what separates beliefs from suspicions or hopes. This is why beliefs can really guide our behavior. We all believe that we were meeting here for a talk at 7:30 tonight. Anyone who thought the talk was going to start at 8 will be wandering through the door in a few minutes. Beliefs organize our behavior. Just imagine the change in you neurologically that would occur if you came to believe suddenly that this building was about to collapse. Mere words, someone would just come into the door and say, run for your lives. And if he looked like a plausible version of a fire marshal, you would have a very different state of being, emotionally, behaviorally. So that the fact that you're content to even stay seated here at the moment rests very much on what you believe to be true about your circumstance. Faith simply greases the wheels of cognition in the meantime, allowing us to take on board representations of the world that are presumed to actually represent the world. They're presumed to be true. It's presumed that Jesus really he was the Son of God, or that a cracker literally becomes Jesus if you say the right Latin words over it, or that there is a God who can respond to prayer. And we presume these propositions to be true in the absence of sufficient evidence. Now, undoubtedly, there are people in this room who are going to want to say that faith is something else entirely. It's an inner knowing, it's a movement of the heart, it is some other kind of esoteric experience. What I'm arguing is that that is not what billions of people on this earth.
Okay, faith is a difficult word. That is a word that's misread, it's misunderstood, bad things come from it, people don't get it, and when people don't get it, yet insist on it being important, usually a lot of death happens. That's usually the consequence for people insisting they get things this way without it being in harmony with reality. On the other hand, regarding Harris's criticisms of belief, he said something like, people believe things without sufficient evidence. I could, a lot of other people could too, make a case very easily that there's no such thing as sufficient evidence for anything at all, anything, except that you are you, that you think, therefore you am. You know that one? But I mean, this is, and it's not just an academic philosophical game. It depends on your patience, because if you're not familiar with the arguments, someone would walk you through to that point. Say, how do you know you're not dreaming? Well, you don't. I've heard that if you try to read and you find out that you can't, then you're dreaming. Apparently, the part of your brain that registers hard language is not on. So maybe there are ways, but there have certainly been times that I have dreamt that I wasn't sure if it was a dream. I thought it wasn't a dream. And I even told myself in the dream, this is not a dream. So, I mean, that's Rene Descartes. I think, therefore I am, right? That's philosophy. Other people say there are objective qualities and there are subjective qualities. Like if you say, name anything out there, a tree, a seed, a leaf, something, if you say a seed, a tree, a leaf, something like that, then you are making reference to a general idea, but each one of those is different. So I say leaf, right? You picture a leaf, but that's just one. There's just one leaf. There's so many other leaves. Are we talking maple leaf, oak leaf? Are we talking a dried, crumpled one? Are we talking a fresh green one? Are we talking, there are so many different subjective positions that we take from our understanding. It's no easy game, right? You've got to put work into understanding things that you care about. And the concern is the first ingredient. That's the first ingredient that brings us to where we need to get to. It's the choice to travel that road, right? We must make choices over and over and over again to recommit ourselves to, to that type of thing. Maybe if I was like, if I went, yeah, we've got to make choices about what we're going to pay attention to, right? It's like the good wolf, bad wolf inside of us all. And say, which one wins? Whichever one you feed, right? But there are other aspects of human nature that make that a complicated proposition. If I say, do not think about a chocolate chip cookie, don't picture it no matter what you do. You can picture anything else, but no matter what you do, don't think about a chocolate chip cookie. I'll be back in an hour. We've got a machine hooked up to your brain, so we'll know if you even think about it. Don't. That's the one rule you got to follow. Don't think about this one thing. Well, our minds are set up that as soon as we're told we can't do something, it increases the likelihood of us wanting to do it by like 70 to 90%. You can't quantify this stuff, actually. So back to the original point. Harris says people believe things in the absence of sufficient evidence. But as a philosopher or a student of social sciences that there's no such thing in many, many cases as deductively or absolutely, certainly sufficient. Well, maybe there's a difference between sufficient and necessary, right? So sufficient would be just enough to believe it. But even then, we're on this very, very difficult ground because without somebody else to confirm what, anyways, that's philosophy and it gets complicated. So for him to make that statement or claim is, this is what the new atheists miss, okay? They were more right than any organized religion, all right? Their secular, generally humanist interest in morality and ethics and functionality according to humans, instead of where when we get it wrong, us humans will be like, I'm not a human, I'm an American. Or I'm not a human, I'm a Christian. Or I'm not a human, I'm a Muslim. I'm a this, I'm a that. I'm an atheist, right? It's like, but those categories are illusions, number one. And number two, very, very bad for people. They don't take us to where we need to go. We need to question our beliefs. We need to fortify understanding. And we need to be honest about where we are in that process. Many, many, many folks, I would say the actual majority of folks don't commit themselves to that process. They're only interested in getting the approval of the people they perceive to be either in a position of authority or someone that can provide them with something that they want, perhaps need. And a lot of that comes from conditioning. So, Jack, tell me, buddy, where'd you go? Anyways, golly day, man. People just fucking suck out here. Look, pearls before swine, before swine, before swine, before swine.
Mean by faith. Now, the faith of billions, these incompatible claims about the divine origin of certain books, this faith has divided our world, has balkanized our world into separate moral communities. Christians, Muslims, Jews, Hindus. This is a problem. These are divisions in the human community over which conflict is inevitably happening. Either you believe Jesus was the Son of God, or you don't. If you do, if you believe that there's no path to the Father but through the Son, it is impossible, logically impossible, emotionally impossible, for you to really respect the beliefs of Muslims and Jews. Those beliefs...
This is not true. This is not true. I understand... I understand when people take a conventional example, all right? When they take an example of, say, an extremist, the way it's presented on television, right? I understand how in some cases that may be true. But for the majority of people, we're not that committed to our religions. We are when people are looking, but we're not when we're just not as humans. We're not, it's a choice to do difficult things to become better, right? Just like sports, athletics. You want to be fast. You're not going to be able to achieve that goal without putting work into like timing yourself, stretching, learning better foods and different techniques, studying other people that have become successful in the objective that you've taken upon yourself. Yeah, it's a mess. It's a mess. Ain't nobody figuring this out, and ain't nobody give a fuck. So fuck y'all. I'll see you next time, maybe. I think I'm done with this shit though.